Hi everyone, welcome to the Parrot Teacher. I'm David, I'm joined by Chip and Fish, who'll probably be being very naughty in this video. Today's video is going to be all about tips and tricks to get your parrots back in their cages. I know some of you have problems with this and I thought it'd be useful to do a video exploring some easy solutions and some things that me and Sophie have used. It's not uncommon for a parrot to be reluctant to go back in their cage, especially due to various factors which we'll talk about. However, it's something that can be resolved and it's not that difficult with a bit of effort, time and patience. So the first thing you want to look at before you even think about training or any techniques like that is, why does your parrot not want to go back in a cage? Is the cage too small? Is it just not very welcoming and not very fun? I always like to use the analogy of a bedroom for your parrot's cage. It shouldn't be a cage, it should be a bedroom full of fun things, and it should be somewhere they can enjoy being in. The other very important thing to look at is treat motivation. Is your parrot motivated when you give them a treat? Because if they have no treat motivation and you're offering them a treat to go back in, they're not going to want to, because effectively you're asking them to do something they're not really wanting to do. So you need to look at that treat motivation. Is their diet good? And do you know what their favourite treats are? Which you can find out by doing a treat hierarchy test, which I'll leave a card for now so you can learn a little bit more about that. Very technical term for something very, very simple. Just finding out what your parrot's favourite treats are. Once your cage is a bedroom and they have, or you know that they're treat motivated and everything, you can start putting things into place to make it easier. And I know a lot of people say, oh, my parrot doesn't want to go in, you know, diet's good and the cage is lovely, but there's normally a reason, and we're going to look at some techniques and tips you can apply to make those reasons a little bit less of a factor. Here we have baby Olive's cage. I've popped her out already so I can pop her back in. If you look, it's a very well-sized cage. There's loads of toys in there, lots of fun things. So it is like a bedroom for her. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop her in. I'm just going to use my reinforcement. Step up. Pop her in. She's quite happy to go in because she knows she can get a treat and she's happy in her cage. She likes it. It's like a bedroom to her. My first tip for getting your parrot back in the cage is always treat, always reinforce it. Make it really positive every time they go back in that cage. It is just such a useful technique, because if your parrot's reluctant to and they don't really want to, if you give them a little bit of incentive to go back in, it becomes a really positive thing and they're more motivated to do it. A lot of the work I did with Scampi made this problem just disappear. He's just so motivated to go back in because he wants his treat. And sometimes when he's had enough, he'll actually take himself over there and ask me to put him back in the cage for a reward. It is very effective, especially if you're persistent with it. Always reinforcing, always rewarding with a top tier treat as well. It has to be something they really want. And if you reserve that top tier treat, if you're having difficulty just for going back in a cage, you'll find it's even more effective as a motivator. Here we have the boys, and I have some top tier treats in my hand, so I'm going to pop them in. Close the cage door, and immediately reinforce them, although Chip's more interested in having a go at his brother at the moment. But that's all there is to it, just reinforce with a top tier treat the moment they go in. Another technique I would highly recommend is target training. Target training is one of those essential skills for any parrot owner, and you should just make sure you have your parrot target trained, because it's so good in so many different situations, and even for trick training and fun. But in this context, when your parrot's target trained, you can use target training to get them to go back in the cage. They know that if they touch the end of that stick, they're going to get a lovely reward. So if you use targeting to get them to go inside the cage, you're more likely to be successful, because they're going to go in, target, get a treat, and then you can shut the door and they're going to be quite happy. You can even continue the targeting session while they're in the cage, so you can link it to something more positive, like we discussed in the previous point with reinforcement. That way, the fun doesn't stop when they go back in, they're still having training session, and it's all lots of fun. Here we have my target stick, and we have Mr. Scampi. So I'm going to get Mr. Scampi onto his perch with the target stick, reward him. I'm not going to rush, I'm going to take my time, as I talked about in the previous point. Go back down, target, onto your perch. And target. Good boy. And this is basically what I'm talking about, just doing some target training around the cage, on the cage bar, and then you can help him go in. Once he's in, I can do some more targeting with him there too. Another very important thing to bear in mind when you're popping your parrots back in their cage is you need to take your time. If you're going to do it in a huge rush, your parrot's going to pick up on that and they're going to know. They just know that you're in a rush, you want them to go back in that cage because the post is coming, you're rushing out. So leave a bit of time, maybe leave 5-10 minutes before it's time for them to go in if you're having a difficulty with it. So they can pop back in and you can relax with it, because it may take a few tries, even with reinforcement, especially if you're training them to get used to it. And if you don't rush, you're going to find it's going to be a lot less stressful for you, and they're not going to pick up on that stress and be a lot happier. Did you just see that fish's beak snapping at my head because Chip's hiding behind me? But yes, do not rush. Another thing that's a common problem when you're getting your parrot back in a cage is bedtime. Parrots can be reluctant to go back in, especially if evening's lots of fun and they're having lots of reinforcement and fun times out and about. So making it a routine and using all these tips rolled into one. So making it a routine, take plenty of time for them to go in, make it a little training session as well, and then reinforcing as part of a routine for bedtime will make it more effective in getting them back in if you're consistent with it and you maintain it. And my last quick fire tip for helping with getting parrots back in the cage is putting a perch somewhere easy to access. For example, if you've got a cage door that opens outwards, putting a little perch on the inside of that cage door so you can use that perch to pop your parrot on and train around it as well. It makes it so much easier to get a parrot back in the cage because it's easily accessible and there are no issues with it when it like folding them underneath or trying to push them in and quickly shut the door. You can make it all very easy. You can also pop them underneath a perch right at the front, and either way works very effectively. Especially with the door perch idea, that is also quite popular with a lot of parrots because it's kind of a peeking perch and they kind of associate it with positive things and looking out, so it can be sometimes easier to get them on it. Here's an example of a perch on a door. It's nice and easily accessible. It doesn't interfere with the door opening or shutting. And I can pop Scampy on here to do some training and get him on there to make it easier to get him back in the cage. For Scampy specifically, it's been very useful, and both him and Pickles love looking out from this perch too. Now, those are the tips I have in this video. I've tried to roll in most of the quick fire tips I can think of. There are more things you can do, however they depend on the individual parrot and they take a lot more explaining. I hope you found this video useful. If there's anything else you'd like to ask or know, please feel free to leave a comment down below. But in the meantime, from me and quite a well-behaved Chip and Fish, really strange, take care and have a really good day.